So one of the ways that Jay and I really enjoy working with people is by actually having the conversation, that you're welcome to ask questions and make contributions, and we're going to ask questions of you also. And there will be physical practice this morning to put it in the body too. So my first question for you is, how did you experience this meditation? What did you notice about it? What was the influence on you?
I felt very connected to everyone in the room. I felt like there were stars that I was connected to.
Yeah. So more connected to the people in the room, in spite of not talking with them, not needing the verbal connection. Yeah. Yes. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. And so you're noticing, like, temperature is happening and it's different one side to the other, and you have the quality of attention that lets you notice that. Kind of subtle. If you were engaged in a conflict and a big argument, you probably wouldn't notice that. Your brain would be somewhere else than noticing the subtle sensation of that. Yeah. What else? Yes.
So I noticed that when we would reach out, it seemed further away for me than when I brought it back to me. That the distance was smoother or quicker when it came back. Almost like searching and then receiving was quicker.
Yeah, that's intriguing. Right. So just to keep noticing, if I ask for this meditation again, does it change, or is that pretty consistent for you? And
yeah. It was each time it felt that way.
Yeah, so as we go through the morning, if I bring it up again, you can notice, is that a consistent experience that you have? So you're researching. We're all researching as yogis. Yoga is a science and an art and a practice and a life. But scientists research the thing more than once. They don't get their conclusion after one iteration of the research. So we'll keep practicing to see if that's a consistent experience for you, or if it changes as the ecosystem changes through the asana or pranayama practices. What intrigues me about it is I use this meditation almost like we're dolphins, and you're sensing. They're using sound. We're using attention to sense where we are, like a school of fish. Here we are. And so what intrigues me about it is how any one of us orients ourselves in that. Some people feel very annoyed to have to be aware of others. That's valid. Other people feel very comforted by an awareness that others are here. Some people have had a long-standing meditation practice that's only inward, deeply inward. And this is an environmental mindfulness tool that I was giving you, aware of the ecology that includes other people. So if your practice is normally very inward, you might feel like it's a little bit abrupt to have to be aware of the outside mindfulness tools out here. There was a hand here? Yes.
Oh, well, I was just going to piggyback off that. I felt peacefully self-focused when we were doing the wall thing, and I was with it there, but I was very self-focused. And then the moment you said the neighbor to our right or left, I felt like more of a heartfelt sense. And then so that was a cool experience. That I just shifted straight from my relationship with myself to like my relationship with these peers.
Yeah. Yes. Very nice. Good end. Yes.
I also appreciated that you mentioned to not notice the distance in numbers.
Yeah.
Because the first time you said, like, how far is the ceiling from my head? I was like, well, maybe about 5 and 10. And then, then we stopped, and I was like, oh, that's way better, And then it was easier to just be in my body and kind of feel the space, which was really freeing.
Yeah. So it's the felt sense that we're looking for.
Yeah. Not like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Was tape measure on the list of yoga props? Yes.
I was going to say, like, once the music started and, like, chanting, I always find it, like, just in general, like, the music kind of helps you bring not only the awareness in the room, but, like, we're almost, like, super awesome giant panel that's just, like, going up there, so we're, like, able to just really, like, tap into the divine creativity and allow like those little sparks to happen. Like we're just like clear channels.
Yeah. Yeah, well, something very intriguing for us to know is that the reason that we started with this meditation is that when you're born, when you're conceived and then, hovering in that sea of osmotic support in utero, your felt sense is already exploring, and the sense of hearing. You have the sense of sound, you have the sense of hearing. That's happening before you have the sense of smell, for example, or the sense of taste. And before you have the sense of sight, you have sound, and then we have touch or contact. So we were exploring that because at the earliest stage of life, that's what we have. And we have a felt sense, not an incremental, measured, mathematical sense. We have a felt sense. And so sound, or chanting, in the yoga practice is one of the most powerful ways to come back to that sense of our interbeing, our collective vibration. And as I like to say, this is your skin suit. I call it that, this thing here. But the skin is this illusory boundary between us and the cosmos. And we take it to be very precious, and we have to decorate it and improve it and, flaunt it sometimes and hide it at other times. We have this relationship to this that's about this thing being owned by us, being an expression of us. And there's a place where it is. We have to nurture this. We're stewarding this body for the time that we're able to have it. But there's a larger view from yoga that we're borrowing this life force, and it's manifesting itself through us, in us, as us. Like the song that comes to the harmonium doesn't own it. It came, it went. The harmonium is so happy for the next song to come. Just like totally available, not going anywhere, not saying, "No, Sarah Joy, I just already played a song. That's enough. It's Saturday. Yesterday we had 3 songs. It's not today." The harmonium isn't doing any of that, and we think of it because it's inanimate, but we will be inanimate. If you have had the fortune to be with somebody as their life is ending, you see what the inanimate version looks like, and that is our destiny. Yet this life force, or this consciousness or love, is said to go on being. Yoga is actually teaching us about that. Of course, we've taken a little detour here in the West, and yoga is teaching us about clothing and asana and branding and websites. People say to me, "Where can I see Jay on the internet?" I'm like, he's not on there. He has no website. And I feel obligated to have a website because people need to find resources, and those people that are louder on the internet will be noticed first as resources, and I want to keep some integrity or longevity in what yoga is about here. And this is 30 years of practice and teaching for me, so we have to have a whole perspective like this. So that being said, I'm going to talk about the koshas now for a few minutes, and often the koshas are just the 5 layers, but I just included the ecology. Pardon my hand in your face. So I'm including the ecology, or the environment that we're in, because it includes us. Like the 5 elements in nature and the 5 elements in us, that's interdependent. But I'm also including this ecology because my bias right now as a yoga teacher in the yoga community is that we need to be more aware that the practice is about community. The practice is about developing in ourselves the quality to be nurturing the best in each other. Not only the best in ourselves, but that our practice would help clear out our hearts and our minds and our view, and help us understand our histories and all the psychological impressions, but also really to help us understand that the teachings in the Bhagavad Gita are to love everyone equally, to see in each person the good or the God, however you want to spell it, the good or the God indwelling in them. And that as we start seeing that view, we would be helpless to do anything other than deeply care for each other's well-being. We don't live in a culture that has that perspective. So when yoga came over here to the West, it became a lot more self-centered, like the self-view. One reason it works here in the West is because our sense of self needs a lot more nourishment and affirmation and assurance and boosting and nutrition, like just the basic nutrition of feeling like this self matters. We were so hungry to know that yoga was like wildfire for us. The danger, if we keep going in that direction, is that yoga is more and more about me. Or it's, for you it's about you, and for you it's about you. And that isn't the view of yoga, ultimately. So again, I'm talking developmentally. So it came at a time when we needed the reassurance that this self matters and we can care for it in a vital, respectful way. But that's not the long view of yoga. So there's a turning point in your evolution as a student of yoga where you become more aware of your interbeingness, your interdependence. That actually is our fundamental state. As humans, we've never been independent, and you're not going to be. I'm sorry if you're 19 years old right now. And I'm telling you. Jay's boys, my stepsons, they're now 19 and 22, and for sure they want to be independent. Understandable. But the shoes they're wearing already tell you that it's not independent. The leather on the bottom of the shoes, somebody gave that up to be the leather for their shoes. The water in their glass in the kitchen. Somebody made the plumbing to cause the water to come into our house in a proper manner that they could fill up their glass, and someone's paying the water bill. It's not them. So as independent as they want to be, we're actually not independent. That isn't to discount that we have a drive for our sense of agency and individuation and uniqueness. We do. But I don't want us to lose sight of that as like tunnel vision about me. Me becoming me in the sense that the Western conditioning tells us. You want to add anything?
Everything she said, and that it seems maybe paradoxical, but I think it's really important that we individually take responsibility for manifesting that for ourselves and with other people. So it's not really paradoxical, but it's actually, I want to say, whenever we think there's a paradox, we just don't know enough. That's sort of my attitude about it. So it's that even though we aren't individual, independent people in the sense that she's talking about, we are individually, well, I use this phrase, unilaterally, non-contingently, and unconditionally. We, I think, ideally will manifest the best version of ourselves. And that is a very independent action, in a sense, unilaterally, non-contingently, and unconditionally. But it's in service of the whole. And so I just wanted to add that there's an independent or individual responsibility for each of us to make that contribution to the whole.
Yeah. And if we sense that the best version of ourselves and the cultivation of that is actually to benefit the larger community, that's more in alignment with how your brain is organized. So that's going to make more sense to you neurologically. If you sense that becoming the best version of yourself, thank you, Wyatt.
Sorry it took so long.
It's all right. You're the best version of yourself you can be in all these circumstances. Wyatt is running all over this conference center helping people with their headsets. It's not an easy thing to keep up on.
No.
We all need acknowledgement and empathy, too. So if you were to sense that becoming the best version of yourself is really only on your own behalf, that's going to tire on you, because your brain is not organized to have it be all about you. So we were born with social brains. Neuroscience tells us that the kind of brain we have relies on the interdependent webbing with other mammals. We are mammals. Each of you is a mammal. Like a dog, a cat, or a dolphin. You're a mammal. And therefore your brain is already interwoven with the other brains and has been shaped by other people's brains since you were in utero. And God willing, you had an environment that could shape you well enough that you're here today. I mean, just to say, it worked out well enough, may not have been ideal, might not be the perfect circumstances, but well enough that you survived the years of your utter dependence and helplessness on other people. You survived long enough to be able to make the decisions and push the right buttons to be here in the room this morning. In other words, to register and to get here and such. So it worked out well enough, I like to say. One of the phrases we use in neuroscience is checking that your basic needs have already been met. And in this room, we can say our basic needs have been met. So we're well enough to be here to consider a shift in perspective or a deepening of our understanding. So since our brains are wired like that for each other, we come into the world, we don't have a sense of differentiation when we're born. We come into the osmotic sea of the ecology, and we have these layers of our own ecosystem. So the koshas at the outermost layer, this is called the Anandamaya Kosha. So it's the muscle and bone body. Ana means food. This is super important to understand. The food that you ate for breakfast this morning is now becoming the food that is you. It's happening right now. So whatever you ate for breakfast is now becoming the food of your Anandamaya Kosha. It is also meant to be food for your brain, to work as well as possible, so that you have this capacity for learning and evolving. So when we make food choices to nourish this, may we see ourselves as feeding our brains, not just our muscles and bones, not just our mouths, not just our stomachs, but that we're feeding the food body that we inhabit for the time that we're on the planet. And therefore we make choices to nurture vitality, not just to nurture excitement or sense pleasures. Because one food you might have a great sense pleasure in the mouth is not a wonderful sensory experience for your brain, your body, and digestion afterwards. So do you have this experience sometimes? You have it more often than you want to have it. The amount of laughter tells me you have it more often than you want to have it. So as a yogi, one of the daily recommendations is to do that part better. I'll just be blunt about it. Ronley will back me up as an Ayurvedic specialist, right?
Absolutely.
The recommendation is to do that part better. Because if you're building the vitality of the body to be able to manifest your life, but your body is distracted by things that you're ingesting that don't align with you, you're having an expense while you're trying to fill the reservoir. And that expense is having a big undertow on your energy, even your adrenal system, your digestive system, but also the vital energy for studying yoga. So we look at the physical body and we say, what am I right now doing that's nurturing? Acknowledge that. Be inspired by your own commitment to that. And then ask, what am I right now doing that's not nurturing? And seek the resources and the support and the education or the companionship to update that. Whether that's what you're eating or how you're exercising, what you're drinking, how you're sleeping, how you're caring for your vitality. Now, quite likely, if you've been studying yoga, you've learned how to study yourself to some extent. And you can tell that certain things that you take in have strong effects on you. So it probably is not a mystery if I ask you, what would be one thing that you could update? One thing you could slightly improve on? You already have a sense of what that could be?
Yes.
Yeah. So how about now, as a chance to change that? Or maybe tomorrow is okay. Because today already started, so we'll start tomorrow with when we wake up. On the other hand, tomorrow you're still at the festival, so we can start it on Monday. But the 1st of March is coming, and it's nice to start on the 1st of March.
Okay, how about now?
Maybe you're more in the pagan system and you'll start on equinox. This is the process of us postponing it. We're just procrastinating our own well-being. We're postponing our own vitality. And staying in the undertow of behaviors that don't align with our best self. So this is a really important consideration. The next layer in the koshas is called the Pranamaya Kosha, so the innervation, respiration, circulation, the energetic body, includes the vital organs of the body. So all of that internal wiring, all of those pathways, like in your home, you don't see electrical wires sticking out of the walls, I hope. You don't have to see the plumbing that comes from the city to your home, or from the community to your home. But it's coming into your house and it lights up the lights and it fills up the bathtub. So it's that kind of internal wiring in us. It's called the Pranamaya Kosha, the nervous system body. Now, some of the foods that you're eating are more nourishing for your nervous system, and some are less nourishing for your nervous system. So to become the best version of yourself, you want to consider, when I'm eating to nourish the food body, what is the influence on my nervous system body? When you're breathing, when you're exercising, what is the influence on the anabolic or catabolic energetic system of the body? Anabolic is building up, nurturing. Catabolic is breaking down, destroying. Now, we need to have a good catabolic system to break down food particles, as our teacher Acharya calls them. We break down the food articles. He says articles? Yeah. He's Indian. He's in Mysore. We break down the food articles. That is the catabolic system working well. If it's working well, the food articles are broken down and become resources for the body. But when you're exercising, you don't want to be breaking down your body. Like on your yoga mat, you should not feel that you're breaking down the body, but that you're in the anabolic system. So a build-up, restore, repair, renewal phase. So even how you're exercising, you kind of get the temperature reading or the pulse reading of your nervous system. And how we ask the question in yoga is, when I'm on my yoga mat, am I practicing in a way that is more tamasic, more rajasic, or more sattvic? More tamasic is like more dull, more heavy, more lethargy, more disappointment, more resignation. More rajasic would be more chaotic, more active, more drive, more pursuit, more comparison, more competition, more frenzy, more urgency. Has anybody had that on their yoga mat yet? Okay. Did that feel like yoga to you? In America, it might feel like yoga to you. Because if the whole room's doing that and you get into that, so again, we are social brains, so if you get into the orchestra of that rajas, and you feel yours is harmonious with the rajas in the room, you can actually have a sense of belonging. But we're belonging to a rhythm that's not native to us, not helpful to our awakening. So if that frenzy starts to come on in the classroom, it's very seductive. So today when we practice asana, I'll be asking you to be sattvic, and not to induce the frenzy on your mat, because your neighbor will pick up on it. So your responsibility for stewarding his or her yoga practice is also to be in your sattvic self. That will flow out to your neighbor. Some of you will have 5 or 6 neighbors because of where your mat is in the room. So there's also 6 people caring for you. It's not unidirectional. You might be caring for them, your sattvic nature flows out to them, but theirs flows back to you. Yes?
Can you just say those 3 things one more time?
Yeah, tamasic, rajasic, and sattvic. Yeah. So tamas, T-A-M-A-S, as in Susan, tamas. Tamasic is the description word. Rajas, R-A-J-A-S. Rajasic is the descriptor. And sattva, S-A-T-T-V-A. Sattvic is the descriptor. And to practice in a sattvic manner is to practice with elegance and luminosity and cohesiveness and a sense of your interbeing. Like to actually have that while you're on the yoga mat. Not in a codependent and meshed way, but a sense of respect and cherishment for each other. Did I make that word up? Cherishment. It's a word soon, it'll be in the Google search. Cherishment. An attitude of cherishing others. So the Pranamaya Kosha is the nervous system body, and if we go one layer deeper, it's called the Anandamaya Kosha. Manas here means the mind, and means the animal mind, the mind of the senses. On Thursday we discussed in the class on the Gita that the 100 cousins across the battlefield, for whom Arjuna was to do battle against them, those 100 cousins were born from the blind king, the blind sense tendencies. So those 100 cousins are the ways in which the human mind goes out of balance, really badly. So the manas, the animal mind, with the senses, represents how the senses take us out of balance. Most often in grasping and aversion, in clinging and avoiding. So the manas, if the senses are interpreting the world, fast fire, high speed interpretation, and then sending the news to your mind. Your mind is now making little impressions, like a slideshow in there, of what the world is going to be like. And those slideshow impressions are actually stored in your hippocampus. Hippocampus. The hippocampus is like many, many slides between you and reality. And you're looking through those slides. It's very hard to see clearly because the view is so many slides between you and the actual experience around you. So this is much like if you think about your dog. Here's a little story about our dog who's now deceased. It happens, of course, like unconditional love and impermanence. When he was a puppy, he actually walked. Some of you know he became handicapped pretty quickly, and he was in a stroller or a wheelchair for a long time. But when he was a puppy, he actually walked, and we'd walk by the house 4 doors down from our house on the left, and there were 2 massive black labs in there. And Poquito was a tiny black lab corgi mix. He was like a 30-pound shrunken black lab. Like, totally adorable. Right? He had big ears like a corgi, and he had the little legs of a corgi, but he had the face of a black lab, and his legs were crooked, so he couldn't walk that well. But he was determined to be a black lab, and these 2 major black labs on the left were walking down, and he could not resist barking at them. And at the time, he was strong enough that I had to then pull him on the leash and do some dog training to go past this driveway. The barking was ferocious, and they barked back. And then I would put him in his dog trailer behind my bicycle. I had a dog trailer for him to go to work with me. So I ride the bike to the yoga studio, and Poquito's behind me, lounging, taking in the world. He's not pedaling. No pedals for the dog. Just hanging out. We go to the yoga studio. On the way out of the neighborhood, he barked at the driveway. On the way back to the neighborhood, he was barking at the driveway. Even 6 years after those dogs had died, he was still barking at the driveway. In both directions, he was barking at the absence of black labs. This is an illustration of how our minds are doing it too. We get a sense impression, and we are sure that we should bark at the driveway. We are so sure of our reaction being justified by the past, by past impressions. And the Pranamaya Kosha is holding all of those past impressions for you until they are capable of being resolved. And their resolution doesn't come from more intellectual or cognitive understanding. The resolution will include the next 2 layers in the koshas. So Pranamaya Kosha, the next one indwelling is called Vijnanamaya Kosha. V-I, V as in Victor, I, J, like J, N as in Nancy, A-N-A, Vijnanamaya Kosha. It means the indwelling body of wisdom, intuition, like deepest knowing, wise knowing. That is deeper than your senses and your mind impressions.
Can you say that one more time?
The Vijnanamaya Kosha is the body of intuition, wisdom, deepest knowing, not cognition and not intellect. And it is deeper than your mind and sense impressions. However, it's also more subtle. The koshas get more subtle as you go more deeply in. So because it's more subtle, your sense impressions feel like fireworks to your mind. Like you're just approaching the sunset on the bike ride, all getting tranquil, so lovely. Oh, it all is love and belonging after all. Everything is so harmonious and beautiful, and then the dog starts barking in the back of the cart. And that's louder than, and has to be tended to. It's, no, Poquito, no necesito, no. And it's like 10 seconds to get by this driveway, but he's barking in approach, he's barking at, and he's barking in the departure. And that happens to your mind, like you're just getting into the tranquility of things, and then a thought impression comes up. And it seems louder than, more compelling than, and more important to solve. A lot of our thought clusters can't be solved by intellect. In fact, I'd say most of them. So that Vijnanamaya Kosha, it gets missed a lot because we are pulled out to the sense mind. We're pulled from Vijnana to Mana, and then the nervous system says, yeah, let's go for it, we got to solve this, and then the physical body and the physical actions are trying to pursue the resolution. That's an outside effort like that. So Vijnanamaya Kosha being more subtle, even more indwelling and more subtle than that, is Anandamaya Kosha. And that's the home ground of love and belonging. That's where we experience the suchness we were born as. And that suchness that you see when you are blessed to hold an infant, a kitten, a puppy, before the heavy conditioning takes on for the infant or that becomes toddler and adolescent and so on, and we start obscuring who we actually are. It's that indwelling, unconditioned radiance.
Can you spell that one, please?
Yeah, Ananda. Ananda. Anandamaya Kosha. Maya Kosha.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So if that is most indwelling and most true, and reconciles all the stories we tell about our brokenness, if that's deeply in there, and it reconciles all the stories we tell about what has to be fixed in us, or what's wrong with us, why do we not dwell in that place more often? What do you know about this?
It's so
Yeah.
loud.
Go ahead.
I would say it's so loud. Like, there's so many other, like, the sense and, there's so much else to get through.
Yeah, the static, the noise.
The habits.
The habits. Yeah.
I was gonna say it's our darkness, like in yoga in general, like we have to go through the darkness to get to the light. So like that's kind of our mission here on earth, is to like find that spot, even though it's scary, to be brave, to face it, and then we get the prize at the end if you like are able to complete it and get through all.
Yeah, so the Manamaya Kosha, if you think of this as circles, like ripples on the surface of the water, Anamaya, Pranamaya, Manamaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya. So Anandamaya is your deepest radiance. Vijnanamaya is your wisdom and intuition. Neither of those are obscured or diminished at all. But the Manamaya Kosha becomes like a dense jungle. It's very hard to see through that. The more deeply patterned the mind is, the mind and sense body, the darker it is to see through. It is as if you had very dark stained glass windows for glasses, and you were trying to see the world through that view. And through that view, there's a lot to fix. In you and also in others. Now, certainly there's a lot to fix. I'm not in denial about that. I work in prisons and rehab centers and school systems and hospitals. I see. But from the view of yoga, the effort that we're right now making to fix all of that, and the way we're making the effort, it's not solving it. We've been making an effort for a long time, but so it's not actually solving it. So the way we're making the effort might need to be examined. So that Manamaya Kosha, when it gets really dark, like a dense jungle, those are all mental patterns. So in the practice of yoga, we have asana, pranayama, mindfulness, inquiry, chanting, to come back home. And as we are practicing that, we pierce through the dense jungle of the Manamaya Kosha. We taste this thing that feels so amazing. We also see it in others. There's this radiant glow of tranquility and awe. And we taste that. That needs to be cultivated, sustained in our awareness. As a suchness of its own, it does not need us to cultivate it at all. It's just waiting for us to come back home. But our memory, called smriti, has to keep cultivating our awareness of that. I personally find it easier to be aware of that, to stay with that, if we are taking care of the Anamaya, Pranamaya, Manamaya Kosha. It's not enough just to know that that exists and we'll get there someday after the Super Bowl. You actually want to keep cultivating it in all these layers so you have a felt sense of it. Not an intellectual sense, not a scholastic sense, but the lived sense of it. Yes?
The way I'm kind of like visioning it is if those two inner layers are kind of like the maze, that there's multiple ways to get into the center, but some ways are taking longer. And the short ways obviously are the way you want to get there, but if you go through the long ways to get there, sometimes you can be really frustrated and challenged, but when you find a little bit more joy and acceptance of being lost in that maze, it's almost as if those layers just kind of fold in. Yeah. So there's so many ways to get to those inner layers, but finding the joy of being lost and the joy of not knowing, the joy of uncertainty. Yeah. it's almost a way to kind of make your own shortcut.
Yeah, yes, because the quality of our pursuit or our attitude makes such a difference whether it's the long route or the short route. You could be lost and be curious, or lost and frustrated. Which is going to take longer? The frustration part. Because it blocks us from seeing clearly. As when you're lost in traffic and the person driving does not want to hear you say, I'll get the map out. Or could we stop for directions? Like, no, I'm going faster while I'm lost. We'll get there, don't worry. We don't need directions, we just need to speed up somehow. It confuses me. So in a few minutes we're going to take this into the physical practice, into the body practice. But I want to underline that, again, the thing that's blocking us from remembering the Anandamaya Kosha is actually heavy conditioning, dense, heavy conditioning. We'll have a short practice now, and I'll be teaching to that. And then Jay and I will unpack for you, why is the conditioning so seductive, and what can we do about it? Now, this might sound like a surprising comment for me to say, but I think we'll verify it for you after the practice. The dilemmas you have at the Anandamaya Kosha, that is your daily care for your physical body. The dilemmas you have at the Pranamaya Kosha, the daily care for your nervous system body. And the dilemmas you have at the Manamaya Kosha, the daily care for your senses and your mind. All those dilemmas are relational. I'm not blaming anybody in your life, and I'm not blaming you either. It's just that all those dilemmas are relational. They all have a relational component. You can't escape that. Sometimes the relationship is between you and your history, or between you and your expectations. And even those are relationally driven, and they got relationally embedded in us. So if that's the case, then relationship has to be a part of our healing. So in this regard, to become the best version of ourselves, we're going to raise up our community to do the same. And then we have more resources for our relationships to be about healing. So it works out for us mathematically a lot better to consider that we are a part of caring for the whole, and we're making the best version of ourselves to do that. And magically, the whole is also caring for us. We may not see that right now because our culture hasn't developed it, but it is the vision of the Gita and of yoga. Any questions or objections to what I've said there? Any additions?
It seems like it's cultural. I mean, are you saying conditioning culturally?
Yeah. When I say conditioning, I mean at every level. So culturally, even ecologically, right? Nobody likes to be really cold and hungry at the same time. I mean, do you like that? Are you your best self when you're too cold and you're too hungry? How about cold, hungry, wet, and tired? Freezing rain and not enough food and you're really exhausted. Are you the best version of yourself right then? So even like environmental conditioning and the ecological conditioning, cultural, historical, the lineage we came from, the lineage we're born into, and then school conditioning, sports conditioning, professional conditioning, educational conditioning. The medical system has conditioning. You know, it's all being soaked into us like a sponge, not realizing that we soaked it all in so deeply. Anything else?
I think the one thing that permeates a lot of how we relate to the world right now is more social conditioning than anything else, which is definitely very distinct from cultural conditioning in that it depends on your region, it depends on what religion your family ascribes to, what political views they ascribe to. And so as you're in your developmental years, you're kind of being inundated with the society that's around you, and it has to shape who you are. And some of that, a lot of that, as we become individuals and start exploring ourselves, we have to decide what to keep and what it is that is actually beneficial versus what isn't.
Yeah. The only thing I would update in what you're saying is that it won't be a decision. It's more like outgrowing. Like when the butterfly is going to outgrow the cocoon. If the butterfly doesn't have the chance to push its wings out against the cocoon repeatedly before the cocoon is broken, it won't be able to fly. So it's like an imperative going on. We might think of it like I'm deciding, but if we back up and wonder what's deciding through me, what intelligence is guiding me, can I line up with that more often? Then the process is actually more effective and efficient. But if we think, I have to decide, what am I going to do here? The numbers of times we get into, I'm deciding, we actually contract back to, I'm deciding, and I could be threatening other people by my decision, or I could be challenging relationships by my decision. Now I'm in my sympathetic brain, fight or flight brain, and I now feel timid about making the decision. So if it's a sense more like the metamorphosis of the butterfly, something's happening through me, can I line up with it? The mental habits have to be quieter to let that thing come through. That's why we practice. So the mental habits fade, and that evolving in us comes through kind of on its own accord and its own rhythm. And you have a felt sense of that, enough that you're here in the room today to pursue a conversation like this. You've tasted that at some point in your yoga experience or meditative experience. And we know the difference in the mind between I'm allowing, interested, curious, and evolving, and I'm willfully trying to make it happen. Do you know the difference? Yes. Yeah. And you're referring to what I'm referring to, I think. I just want to clarify the language because we influence each other with words. So I want to shift the word deciding to the word evolving. It's evolving through us. It, this massive it, is evolving through us. Again, like the harmonium gets to have the music come through it. Requires certain structures to be put in place for that to happen, and those are our daily responsibilities, those certain structures, to let the music come through us.
Can you say that again, that instead of willfully trying to make it happen, what's the
other option?
Allowing, interested in evolving.
Allowing.
Allowing.
Willing. Porous. Welcoming. Surrendering, really, yoga calls that surrender, abhyasa and viragyam. Ishvadi pranidhana. Shraddha, have faith that you're going in the right direction. Yes.
Could you speak a little bit more about what you're saying, just because, so what you're saying, instead of making it happen, we're like allowing, gracefully enabling things evolve or whatever, At the same time, with the Temasek and Rajasic, like, it could be interpreted as being just like being passive and not putting the effort.
Us out of balance, right? Like, just allowing it to happen. I hope it occurs.
Right. So just speak more to that, like the difference between allowing it versus like.
So our responsibility to help this thing happen satvically is the daily responsibilities for caring for this ecosystem, Anandamaya, Pranamaya, Manamaya, Developmental, Kosha, so that Anandamaya can come through us. So those daily tasks are like your asana, pranayama, hydration, nutrition, good sleep, and then relational responsibilities, respect, reciprocity, consideration for the other, and on a daily basis, caring for this thing so that that graceful evolving can occur. So we become Temasek when we say, oh, it'll happen. I'm already awake anyway, like already enlightened. I heard the truth. The masters say we're already it, so it's going to come upon me at some point. The luminous shining will happen. I'm just surrendering, having a cigarette, having a candy bar for lunch, because that's what's easy. I'm already God indwelling, so no big deal. Now, for some people, maybe they have an awakening and they don't need to care for the physical body the way that I'm going to recommend to you. But generally speaking, the care that we do for the body and the practice of this becomes the skills for caring for the Pranamaya and the Anandamaya Kosha also. But on the Rajasic part there, we hear that it's already happening and we have to just tend to the basic requirements. But then we're like, I'm going to hyper-tend. I'm going to do this in a hyper-vigilant way. I'm going to have all the right vitamins and minerals and the right practices at the right amount of time. And there's a kind of frenzy about improving yourself to have this awakening thing happen. Well, that frenzy is obscuring the experience of Ananda.
That's willing as a verb as opposed to an adjective.
Yeah. I've tried that model. It wasn't successful. So let me save you the time on that mountain path. I tried that model already. You've also tried it. Yeah, it didn't work out. Yeah. Okay, 2 questions and then we'll go to practice.
So you talk about so really not being in a frenzy, allowing, but there are some personalities that are frenzied because that's who they are. So you have ADHD, right? So what do you do with them? Can that personality reach the koshas without stabilizing that personality? Because I mean, it's in my household.
Yeah. Well, because our brains are wired together, like the internet, we're all wired up to this massive thing called the internet. The brain of someone who has ADHD or depression or anxiety will need us to be stewards or lighthouses for their wiring to get kind of updated. Primarily by love and care and role modeling and empathy, consideration, respect, nourishment, not by trying to mold or shape and not by criticizing. Because the sympathetic brain turns on in reaction against that if we feel like we're going to get molded, shaped, or coerced into being a better person on somebody else's idea of what that is. So when brains hook up with each other, which I think you'll experience in this asana practice, we all evolve. And I said this on Thursday, so I'll just say it again now since it's coming to mind. Because we are designed to have the welfare of all beings be something instinctively important to us, it would be very unlikely that we would want to evolve while leaving behind family members or friends or even coworkers or the homeless person on the street or the Vietnam vet out here who was begging yesterday. It's very hard to walk by that and not have the care registered somewhere in your system. At times, because we're overwhelmed, that care gets morphed into disdain or dismissal, or we avert our gaze. But that's not native to our species. It's heartbreaking to have that be our experience, but we've learned to numb ourselves to knowing that that's happening. So by the design of the brain, the species would say, if my household has ADHD, maybe it's my stewarding or my lighthouse that evolves us all, without any sense that you're manipulating them. Because you wouldn't be able to psychologically, neurologically, emotionally, spiritually, sort of leave them behind. Yeah. You understand what I'm saying? It's a pretty big perspective. One reason that we don't evolve as individuals is that we don't see our culture going there. And that's hard and heartbreaking. And not just that we don't see our culture, so it's conditioning us to stay like dull or frenzied and blah blah, and the tamas and the rajas. But we don't see our culture going there. And people ask me this all the time. If I keep evolving, who will my friends be? Who am I going to hang out with? If I move to this higher view, where are my relationships going to be? Don't let that question stop you, because we need more people to be at that elevation game. We'll be there with each other. The answer is us. I felt your thought bubble.
Well, that was the you and you thing, unilateral, non-contingent, unconditional. That we maintain that path of our best self. We may not be able to will a change in anything, but we can create a node or a context for a healthier place for these other things that can become like a lighthouse. I have a little story about Jason.
Yeah, let me give you this headset.
You're
gonna talk loud enough?
So there was my eldest son was colicky for months, and meaning he cried incessantly for many hours every night until 3, 4, 5 in the morning sometimes. And since I worked during the day, I had the night shift. And so I had many hours, intimate hours with my young son. And I found it to be one of the most disturbing, frustrating experiences of my life, was to be sleep deprived and compelled to do something to stop him from crying. And I've somewhat facetiously said that I came to an understanding, and it's true, actually, I came to an understanding of child abuse in a way that I never could have before. Because it was just so intensely frustrating, hour after hour, and feeling an instinctive compulsion to make this go away. but also the incredible vulnerability and suffering. So it was an interesting, intense crucible of human stuff. And one day, through no willing of my own, in either sense, I think, it just, something popped into my head. The neuron fired off, and I came to an insight that I think is quite possibly the only epiphany I've ever had in my life. That I'm here just so that he doesn't have to suffer alone. Not to make all that go away, but so he doesn't have to suffer alone. That's sort of the lighthouse thing.
Yeah.
That was a pretty big thing for me.
We actually use the word lighthouse in our yoga therapy training. We tell our yoga therapists that we're just developing you into being a lighthouse. So people don't have to experience the suffering alone, or the confusion, or their evolution. They're not alone in doing it. Jason is a very docile, easygoing, introverted, quiet adult now. Jason is the son he was talking about. I wasn't there for those colicky years, but Jay did tell me that after months and many, many hours of this, he still has an elbow injury. The shoulder from just trying. How many hours of that? So the Anandamaya Kosha, the physical body, has the most dense structure and remembers. Even though the Manomaya Kosha was freed from it and Jay landed back in the Vijnanamaya Kosha and in the Anandamaya Kosha, his physical body still has the pattern of that shoulder injury, that elbow determination on behalf of Jason. Not a bad thing to remember because it was a significant awakening experience, but just to say that the physical body is the least likely to transform and the most likely to hold the memories. So we do transformation at the deeper layers of the koshas. That's why we don't just keep working so hard at asana, but the quality of practice, and the qualities of attention, and the care for the nervous system during practice, the care for the senses during practice. Thank you. So let's do physical practice now.